Hi YouTube, today's video is going to be about modern feminism, the rise and glorification of porn and prostitution and sex work, sexual abuse, and basically women's issues generally. So this video is unscripted. This is all just going to sort of come from the heart because this is an issue that hits home for me, and I just want it to be as authentic as it can be. Now, that doesn't mean that I can make my arguments come from emotion still, so I'm still going to make logical arguments. I don't get to say that just because this personally affects me or this personally hits home for me, that means it just is the truth. That's not how rationality works. What is true regardless of who says it. So, I'm still going to use logical arguments, but because it does hit home, I want this to be as authentic as it can be. So, with the cuties thing, if you guys are familiar, there's a Netflix special that came out with it was called Cuties. There was many people left and right on the political spectrum agreed that this was kind of this is wrong. It sexualized little girls. Now, I'm gonna be real with you guys. I did not watch the film, so I'm not going to pretend like I did. I didn't watch it. And I don't actually know everything about it. I don't know what my personal take is since I didn't watch it. But from what I'm hearing from a lot of people all over the political spectrum is most people agree this very much sexualized little girls. And that apparently, like, the producer is a woman who saw how little girls are kind of being sucked into this over-sexualized culture. This is coming from people who have watched it themselves and who are telling that this is what she says. That she made this movie apparently because it's supposed to be sort of uncomfortable. Apparently she made it because it's supposed to be like these little girls are living in a culture that is so, like, almost too open about sex that they are sexualizing themselves and seeing themselves as sexual objects, and apparently the intent of the producer was the opposite of what the effect was, which is that it wasn't supposed to be glorifying objectification of women and little girls. It wasn't supposed to be glorifying all of these things. And honestly, if that's true, if that's her critique and she made that film for that reason, I actually agree with that take. This is not something a lot of people today agree with me on the political left, but I believe that we have gone way too open about sex. And there's a difference between not being ashamed of sexuality. There's a difference between being okay and being comfortable to ask your parents questions about sex or learn about how sex works in school. That's a different thing. But I truly believe that, you know, sometimes people say that, like, we live in a more sexist society today than we did 50 years ago, and my first reaction is to be like, I totally disagree. It's the complete opposite. It has never been more equal for women and girls. But then another part of me actually kind of does agree, but it doesn't come from where you think it comes from. A lot of times when I see some of the most sexist things that I've seen in my life, it came from people who were more politically left. Now, I'm not saying that sexism is something that only people on the left can have, or that's definitely not true. But sometimes people think they're so right in their morals that they can become blind to their own bigotry or unintentional sexism. And I think that this glorification of many of the things I'm going to be talking about today has hurt women and girls so terribly bad. And I'm not okay with that. I'm not okay with the way it's hurt everybody, but especially women and girls. So again, I think that Cuties, from what I've seen, her intent, I actually agree with that analysis of our culture. If that's really what it is, I actually agree with it. That at some point, when all we see are the over-sexualization of women and girls in porn and sex work, we make them seem like this is something to be proud of, as if they are nothing but a sexual object, and then we claim that it's actually empowerment. I think at some point, it doesn't just become adults that buy into that. Eventually that kind of trickles down to little girls when that's what they see. These are the role models they see. So I agree with that, but I also think that doesn't mean that Cuties didn't still objectify little girls, whether it meant to, because I still think it did. You know, if I want to make a movie about why murder is wrong, I wouldn't murder people in my film, even if my intent was fine. And I know that that's an extreme, but I'm trying to make a point that even if you agree with the intent, the result can still be very damaging. And I think with Cuties, it was very damaging. And let me say, I had people on my social media pages saying that people who, I'm not going to say their names, but I did, and it's just the reality. I had people on my social media pages saying that people who were critiquing this Cuties film were endorsing rape culture. Because the idea that if you see sexualization in a little girl, then that's a problem with you. No, it's not, actually. You can very clearly see when someone is being sexualized. That doesn't mean that I personally sexualize little girls. When I say that the left has become so progressive that they've become regressive, this is what I mean. I'm not against progress, but make sure it's actually progress and not regress. Because you can become, it's kind of like you're outsmarting your common sense. Like, you can become so intelligent that you kind of think yourself into the opposite of what is true. And I think a lot of times that is the critique of the left. That they kind of think themselves into lies. Into making things that are clearly immoral seem like they're not. And there's a lot of people on the page who were left who agreed that this was bad. But there were some very far left people on my page who were literally saying that this was endorsing rape culture if you were against what Cuties did. And to me, that is insane. I literally can't even argue with it because it's such an insane thing. It's not that I don't have an argument, it's just that it's so beyond the realm of reality that I can't even touch it. If you can't see it, I don't know how I'm going to make you see it. That is crazy to me. There's nothing wrong with grown adults consenting to dancing in sexual ways. Maybe it's a girls' night out. That's your choice. You're a grown adult. These are children. Now, on a personal level, I personally choose to be a little bit more conservative, and I don't mean politically, I just mean that I tend to cover more. I'm a little bit more, I just find empowerment with covering up. Some girls don't. That's fine. I personally think that, for me, I don't need to show my body to anyone who doesn't value me. And when I wear a lot of skin showing, I feel like I'm showing my body to people who don't even know me, who don't value me. For me, that's empowerment. If someone wants to do that, to do the opposite of that, show a bit more skin, in a free country, they have the right to do that. That's fine. And to be honest, some days I do show more skin, and that's fine too. That doesn't make me all these names that girls get called when they show skin that I'm not going to say because we all know them. That doesn't mean that. But little girls, I don't believe should have that choice. Because it's clearly sexualization. Yes, I'm not going to lie. You are sexualizing yourself when you're dressing sexually. Same for men. I'm not calling you a whore. I'm not calling you a slut. I never would, and I never do. But the truth is, you're making yourself sexually appealing when you're wearing sexually appealing clothes. That's just the truth. Now, if you want to say, yes, I am, but that's okay, that's fine. And I agree. But just completely deny that that's what's happening totally. When you do that, that's when people start saying it's okay for little girls to dress like this. When you do that, that's when it becomes that way. And I feel like that was my biggest problem with this new documentary. I feel like or the people who are critiquing it. It's like you really gotta think yourself out of reality to really believe that if you're critiquing the Cuties film, that somehow that is endorsing rape culture. That is insane to me. So I decided to do this thing where we all have social media, right? So on my social media pages, I see a lot of dumb posts. Just a lot of really dumb posts. And I'm not calling the people who post them dumb. I don't attack people's character, because really all that means is I don't have an argument. But I can say that the argument is dumb. Because a lot of times, to be honest, it is. I'm not going to lie about that. I think they're really dumb arguments. And so I decided to do this thing where not every time I see a dumb post, because if I did that, if I made a video every time I saw a dumb post, I'd be making so many freaking videos. But, you know, every once in a while when I see a dumb post, I kind of just want to critique it in a video. And this ties into the topic of today. So I'm going to talk about it. So this one says, dudes be like, ooh, you sell your body, but literally be in the military. Let me explain to you why this is a dumb argument. Technically, you could argue that you are selling your body for, if you're in the military, or if you're a coal miner, as they say, or for any job literally at all. Because you have to use your body in some way, even if it's your brain. So yeah, technically you are selling your body. But let me tell you why it's very, very different. If here I'm going to reference porn and prostitution. I believe that I guess I have to talk into modern feminists here. I have to talk about modern feminism because this is where this insanity leads. Modern feminism tells us that men and women are basically the same. And in some ways that's true. So studies show that men and women are more same than they are different. We share, according to the female brain book that I read, I don't remember who it's by, but she's a neuroscientist, who's opened many of women's clinics, done a lot of research on women's brains and women's bodies, and probably has done a lot for women and girls throughout the decades, is from what I can tell from when I read the book. Literally the first line in the book, and I'm paraphrasing, is that 99% of all our DNA between men and women is the exact same. That's 99%. That's a huge chunk. We are more the same than we are different. We're not different species. You know, it's not as if we're a different species. It's not as if you're a man watching this right now, you can't understand me. Like, we are the same species. We have way more in common than we don't. But that 1% makes up a huge amount of differences. And it's not socially constructed, at least not a lot of it. So, men and women, specifically with sex, and the feminist movement likes to tell us today that men and women treat sex the exact same. This is not true. As a general rule, this is definitely not true. And I can explain to you the evolutionary reasons behind it. So, think back to before the birth control pill was around. What that means is that when women have sex, it is rolling the dice, basically, on whether or not they will get pregnant, with chances very much higher on the side of they will. And so what that means is that women, evolutionarily speaking, have a greater price to pay, a higher price to pay than men do when they have sex. Because they will have to carry a baby for 9 months, and they will have to take care of that baby, and they will have to have someone around to help them take care of the baby. Whereas men, evolutionarily speaking, could just have sex with anyone and everyone, and then they wouldn't have any responsibility. They don't have to carry the baby. They don't have to care for it. And so, evolutionarily speaking, what that means is that women are literally made to care more about who they're having sex with, because they have more of a price to pay for the potential result of that sexual act. And men don't. Evolutionarily speaking, the only purpose of a male is to spread their genes. And evolutionarily speaking, the only purpose of a female is to care for children. Now, that doesn't mean that that is true everywhere. This is just an evolution. So, what that means is that it doesn't mean that if you're... Sorry, people just rode their bikes by and it kind of distracted me. I'm not saying that the only reason for a male to exist is to spread his genes, because that would imply that if for some reason a man can't have kids, that he doesn't have a purpose, and I don't believe that. I'm talking about just an evolution, what their evolutionary reasons are for their existence, not for every reason. And the people I think a lot of women and men, specifically women, when they get mad about all this, they kind of forget that the birth control pill wasn't always around. Like, the birth control pill didn't pop up until, like, the 70s, if I remember correctly, 70s or 80s. So, or maybe it was a little bit before, but it definitely was way later on in the span of human existence. So sometimes we forget that, like, actually, sometimes it did mean a woman didn't have some self-respect when she had sex with everyone. That doesn't mean that justifies in calling a woman a whore or a slut or whatever it is. It doesn't. I would never advocate for that. But in the past, a lot of times it really did mean that a woman didn't care about herself enough because she was willing to have sex with someone who did not care about her, have sex with anyone and everyone, even though she would be left with the burden, and they were probably asshole men who didn't care about her. Now, when the birth control pill came into effect, that obviously made a huge difference, because that meant that most likely women didn't have to have that bargain. Now, you could still there are still birth control babies, but they're way less common than the amount of people have sex on birth control and don't end up getting pregnant. Sometimes people forget that isn't always the result. So what I'm saying is that, evolutionarily speaking, people always say just because a woman has sex with everyone doesn't mean she doesn't have any self-respect. That's true. But evolutionarily speaking, sometimes it actually did. Now, from my standpoint, I don't think that calling a woman a whore and a slut is going to actually do anything. If you believe that, even if you do believe that she doesn't have self-respect, why would calling her names help her? It wouldn't. And so I agree that is sexist and wrong to do it. And it doesn't, even if you're right about them not having self-respect, it doesn't justify you doing it, but that doesn't mean that their premise wasn't wrong. Also in my female brain book, I learned that, it's called The Female Brain, that at orgasm, when women orgasm and men orgasm, the hormones associated with love spike way up for women, and they do not for men. So, it is literally in our genes for women to care more about sex. And we treat it differently. Now, what does this have to do with prostitution and porn? Well, let me explain to you why it's not the same for someone to be a coal miner or be in the military versus someone to be a prostitute. This isn't scripted, so I'm just sorry for all the typos, I guess. Why is rape wrong? Seriously, why is rape wrong? I would say that rape is wrong because, well, first of all, I think we could all agree that rape is wrong even if it's just because it's not consensual. Like, stealing is wrong because you're not consenting to taking that item. They didn't give you consent and you didn't have consent to do it. So, even from that perspective, we can still all agree that rape is wrong just because you didn't give their consent. But why is rape more wrong than stealing? Why is rape more wrong than something else that is non-consensual? Why is rape, evil? Like, one of the worst things that can happen to a person? Well, probably because there's something about sex that is more than just a transaction. That is more than just a matter of consent. Now, consent is the bare minimum you need, that's for sure, otherwise it's rape. But to be honest, there is something more about sex that makes someone raping you, having sex with you without your consent, raping you, worse than someone taking, or even hitting you. That's still bad, but I would rather be hit than raped. Why is that? Probably because sex actually is intimate. But this is not what feminism thinks today. Feminism tells us that men and women treat sex the exact same, and that sex is nothing more than another sort of bodily transaction, like deciding to consensually give each other a hug or something. Like, it's nothing more than any other kind of consensual transaction. This is very dangerous, specifically for young girls and women. Because the reason why I care about this over-sexualization, this glorification of porn and prostitution, is because when you reduce sex to nothing but a transaction, you then take away the pain that comes with rape. You minimize what people who are raped go through. Why do you think so many people who are raped feel useless and used and worthless after they're raped? Why do you think that this is unanimously a feeling that everyone who's been raped experiences? Now, it doesn't mean that people don't experience trauma differently. Individuals suffer, not collectives don't suffer. But I think most women who, if you poll them, that have been raped, they will all probably agree at some point they felt worthless and used because of their sexual abuse. Why is that? Why is that? Because rape is not just nothing. Because sex means something. And so, this is why the premises of these movements really, really matter. Because if you start from the premise that men and women treat sex the same, and that sex is completely detached from intimacy, you can get to some pretty ugly places that you think are positive and good for women that aren't. More women are unhappy today than in the 60s. How is that possible? At a time when there are more wealthy women, more women in positions of power, more women who aren't less women who are sexually assaulted. How is it that in a time that is technically better for women from those standards, women are less happy? I mean, overall, everyone's less happy from polling data. But women, specifically, very much are less happy. Maybe it's because our culture is very hurtful to women. But nobody sees it because it exists under the guise that it's pro-woman. I know a lot of women who are suffering. I'm not gonna lie. I suffer from this. I'm not saying I'm oppressed or anything. I don't believe that. But this culture, I've cried over this. I've cried over this, believing that women should be like men, which obviously comes from a place of valuing manly things over womanly things, which nobody even sees. I've hated myself. I hated myself in my own skin because the feminist movement told me to. So people wonder why I'm so passionate about these things. It's because I've experienced firsthand how the reduction of what sex means harms women and girls. I know there's so many lonely girls out there because they're treating themselves as if they are nothing but sexual objects. Men will never understand how they convince women that having sex with men all the time is true empowerment. Now, I want to say that if there's anyone out there who's completely disagrees with everything I say about this and is a prostitute maybe, or a porn worker, whatever it is, sex worker, porn star, I'm not saying you're less of a human. And I'm not saying that you don't have self-respect in some areas, but I'm not going to lie, I do believe that ultimately, for most women, this isn't empowering. Now, it's a free country, do what you want. That's my stance. You can do what you want. But that's fine. But when the feminist movement, pro-woman movement, is advocating for this, that's when it's too far. Because you're actually not advocating for women at that point. It's not the same. It's not the same as being a coal miner. I'm not saying that the coal miner being a coal miner is good for your body or anything. But it's not the same as what sex means. Sex means something, especially to women. That doesn't mean that men can't get raped. Now, by the way, I want to make clear here. I also think that men shouldn't be having sex with everyone all the time. On a moral level, I think that both men and women are better off sticking with one person and growing with them, becoming better together. I don't believe, honestly, I think it's a testament of someone's character, both man and woman, when they just give themselves away all the time. Now, again, I'm not saying that they are less of a human, that they have less value, or I'm not, like, looking down on them in judgment. Like, I know that sometimes people say these things and that's kind of what it seems. That's not what I'm trying to do here. But I just can't go along with the lie that this is helping women. Again, in a free country, you can do it. It's a free country. That's my rule. I think prostitution and pornography, as much as I hate it so much as I believe that it is inherently sexist, I truly do believe that, and I do not just throw those words around. So when I say it, I mean it. I still believe it should be allowed. Because that's what freedom is. As long as you're not killing another life. As long as there's no victim. If society is the victim, it's legal. If an individual is the victim, it shouldn't be legal. That's my stance. And so, I believe it should be legal. But I believe that for the social fabric, we have really harmed our women and our girls. And I know people, I'm not gonna lie, like, a lot of people who are into sex work and all of these things, almost all of them have some sort of, like, daddy issue. And I'm not looking down on them. I didn't have a good family structure either. But I'm just making a point that a lot of times people go to these places because they didn't have the positive masculine fatherly figures that they needed. And that they didn't have the love and care that a father is supposed to give you. The self-respect that you're supposed to learn through a father. And it's no wonder that so many of these girls have that same thing in common. Now, I'm not saying every single one, but I this is literally just a guess. But from my personal experience of what I've seen, and if I had to take a guess, I would say if you pulled most prostitutes, a lot of them have that some sort of, my father was bad, or just not good, or he wasn't in my life. Or I grew up and I was abused as a kid or something. Again, not saying that means the choice is wrong. I'm just saying that I think there is a connection there. And I think that I just don't believe that this is helping women. I think that this is encouraging men to see women as objects. To see women as sexual objects. And at some point, when adults are like this so much, what do you think little girls are going to start doing? Little girls are going to start seeing themselves as that too. So I don't think that we're doing a service to our women and girls. I don't. And the worst part is, this is the feminist movement who believes this. Look, I'm not saying that if you watch porn, a lot of guys out there, I know you probably watch porn. I'm not saying if you watch porn, that means you're a sexist bad person. Most of the guys I know probably watch porn. Alright, I don't believe that. I'm just saying that a standard we should set for ourselves is that this isn't necessarily empowering. I don't think that any guy who is getting off to porn is thinking, well, he's doing it. That's a strong, independent woman right there. Let's be real, guys. How many of you guys are thinking that when you're getting off to some naked woman? That she's strong and independent? Probably none of you. Let's be real. You're using her body and her sexualization most of the time when it's amplified and unrealistic as a means of coming. So, like, I'm just not going to act like I agree that this is empowering, because it's not. It's not. And I'm seen as some sexist person for saying this, when ironically, I believe sexism is the exact opposite. Now again, I don't believe that, honestly, let's be real, most men watch porn. Let's just be real about this. But that doesn't, and I don't believe that they're bad. I don't believe that. But I'm not going to pretend like I think it's empowering. I'm not going to pretend like I think that this is true feminism. Because by the book, I am a feminist. If you look it up, what it technically means, yeah, I believe in equal rights. I believe in we all have equal value, for sure. But that's not what it means today. I truly believe that the way it acts in real life isn't actually what it is on paper, as kind of like that toxic masculinity video. I believe that, you know, how something plays out in real life is more of a testament of what it really means than what it says on paper. So, that's what I don't like about this new glorification of porn and sex work. And by the way, it also hurts little boys too. I'm not going to say who, but I know someone who, the rising people who are addicted to porn is, it's kind of crazy. I have someone who I know, can't say his name, but he literally watched porn so much that he wasn't going to sleep, and he was saying things that made him seem like he was like having a stroke or seizure, just saying weird things because he was that sleep deprived. So it's not necessarily helping our boys either. It's helping them, I believe it's encouraging them to see women as objects. It's encouraging them to not have self-control around women. It's encouraging them to, honestly, not value women. And so, you know, I didn't have a phone growing up. That's kind of what makes me a little bit different from everyone else my age. I never had a phone until I graduated, until I moved out. For a brief time, I think I had one, but it got taken away. So I never had a phone until I moved out, basically. So, and I never watched porn. I never did. But one time, within this year, I think, I literally went on Pornhub just because I was curious. I was like, I know I don't like porn. I know I don't like this glorification. But I want to know what I'm fighting against. Because I want to see it for myself. Because I feel like that is... I was kind of taking people's words for it, what it was like. I wanted to see what it was like myself. And I was absolutely devastated. I mean, this is someone who I didn't realize how just commonplace this was. I'm not gonna lie, like, I cried for a very long time after just scrolling through. Now, I'm not saying that, again, if you're out there, I'm not saying you should feel completely like a terrible person if you watch porn or whatever. I'm not saying that. I just am saying that I hope you find some value in what I'm saying here, that even with the least sexist kind of porn there is, the most realistic, you know, it's not staged, it's just a camera there, two people in love having sex, like the most moral sex there is, I still believe that it is inherently immoral. Why? Because you are using someone as a means to an end. So even if it's the least sexist kind, I still believe it is inherently immoral. Because you're using someone as a means to an end. And by the way, same with male porn stars too. But let's be real, there's a lot more female porn stars who are very much objectified, over-sexualized, and just unrealistic. Now I want to be clear here. I'm not against porn and sex work and prostitution because I think sex is bad. Or because I'm uncomfortable about sex. Or because I'm not... Honestly, it's not any of those things. I have nothing wrong with sex. Sex is great. I like sex. I don't know many people who don't. I'm not ashamed of my sexuality. I don't really talk about what my sexuality is because I don't really think it matters. But I'm not ashamed of it. I'm not ashamed of my sex. So that's the critique most people like me get, is that you're just a prude, you're afraid of sex, you don't like. No, actually I'm not. I share memes about sex. I love sex. I think it's great. I'm not ashamed of it. I just don't like objectifying women and objectifying girls and using people as a means to an end and pretending like men and women are the same. See, this premise that men and women are exactly the same except like their genitals, and even sometimes that's denied, but this premise that they're exactly the same in every other aspect is so dangerous because it leads to these terrible results of women feeling worthless and useless and making themselves try to be like a man when they're not. I think true feminism is knowing you are different, but believing you are equal. And that your difference is a strength. I don't think feminism is believing that, is having to deny biological reality because technically you believe you're inferior and so you have to pretend you are equal. Because I actually believe I am equal to men. I actually believe that I have equal value and that I'm capable of doing great things, and I don't believe I have to pretend I'm a man to do it. Now, there are some biological realities, of course, with how much I can lift compared to a man, generally speaking, for sure. That's why we have two different sports, there's no denying. That's apparently not supposed to say that. But there's also biological realities that I can do things men can do. Men can't do. Like, have children. Carry an entire freaking baby for 9 months. I can grow an entire human being in my stomach. Men can't do that. So there are, of course, cans and cannots between the sexes. But I believe that we are equal in value, and I believe that I don't believe that my womanhood and my femininity is inferior, and I don't hate it. Though I'm not going to lie, there was a point where I did, and I truly believe, looking back, that it is today's feminism that created that mindset. And I'm not just saying this for a political thing. I see this personally. I see it when I think back. I really do. I can't go into all these specific examples, but I see it. And it worries me, because I know there's a lot of women out there like that, who maybe they don't notice it, or they do, but they don't speak up because they don't want to be called a sexist. Again, I'm not saying you can't, I'm not saying we should ban sex work. Again, as someone who's more libertarian, meaning, government should be out of people's business for the most part, I think it should be legal. But I just think if we're creating a movement that glorifies it, then we can't be calling that movement pro-woman. There was a time when feminism was saying everything I'm saying right now. I don't know how feminism changed so much. There was a time when feminism was very anti-porn, very anti-prostitution. Because feminism used to be able to know that men and women are not the exact same. But it doesn't anymore, and it's hurting women. And a lot of these movements that claim to be pro a certain group of people, ironically end up hurting that exact same group of people. And I'm not going to sit back and let it happen. I'm going to let my voice be heard. Now, in a free country, do what you want, really. But I think that as a society, if we're going to pretend like this new glorification of things that are very demeaning is empowering, we are setting up our girls for failure. And I know I'm not alone in that thought, even if no one else wants to be brave enough to say it. So, I know this was a long one, but it was a rant, basically. But I hope that, I made some good points. I don't think I was speaking emotionally, but I wasn't using emotional arguments. But basically, the biggest reason why this upsets me is because when you reduce sex to nothing, you make rape seem like it's nothing. That's my opinion on it. So, thank you.